The first thing I learned that night was that my father knew exactly how much I was worth. Not in love, not in years raised under his roof, not in the bedtime stories my mother stopped telling when I was 9, but in dollars, clean and cold, printed on a card clipped to my wrist with a silver ribbon. The ballroom beneath the Halcyon Hotel was buried 3 floors below downtown, far under the traffic lights, sirens, and Friday night laughter of people who had no idea monsters wore tuxedos and drank imported champagne. I stood behind a velvet curtain in a white suit I had not chosen, my fair skin almost colorless under the dressing room bulbs, my pale blonde hair combed so neatly I barely recognized myself in the mirror. Someone had powdered the bruise-colored shadows beneath my eyes. Someone had fastened a scent blocker around my throat like jewelry. Someone had told me to smile, because Omegas from good families were supposed to look grateful, even when their families were selling them. My name was Ethan Whitaker, and until 2 hours ago, I thought my family was just cruel in the ordinary way rich families could be cruel, with locked doors, silent dinners, and love handed out like a loan with interest. Then my stepmother kissed both my cheeks, told me I was finally going to be useful, and handed me to men in black gloves who called me lot number 17. I wanted to run. My knees knew it before my mind did. They trembled so badly the man beside me sighed and tightened his grip on my elbow, not hurting me, just reminding me that every exit had a guard, and every guard had already been paid. Beyond the curtain, voices rose and fell like a tide of polished knives. Alphas, dozens of them. Old money, new money, political money, the kind of people whose names appeared on hospital wings and campaign signs while their secrets stayed buried, where people like me disappeared. The auctioneer's voice floated through the speaker, warm as honey and twice as poisonous, praising my breeding, my education, my untouched public reputation, as if I were a rare painting instead of a 22-year-old man trying not to shake apart under stage lights. Then the curtain opened, and the room swallowed me whole. White spotlight, red carpet, rows of masked faces. My father sat in the front row, his gray suit perfect, his expression bored, one hand resting on his gold watch as if this was taking too long. My heart did something small and hopeless in my chest. The bidding began before I finished breathing. Numbers climbed. 10,000. 50. 100. Each raise of a paddle made the ribbon on my wrist feel tighter. I stared at the floor until the room suddenly went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that happens when every predator realizes something bigger has entered the room. The double doors at the back opened, and Damon Cross walked in wearing a black coat, black gloves, and the calm expression of a man the entire city had learned not to challenge. The most feared Mafia Alpha in Harbor City looked straight at me, not at my price card, not at my father, not at the auctioneer, but at me, like he could see the person everyone else had decided to erase. Damon Cross did not hurry, and somehow that made him more terrifying than if he had stormed in shouting. He moved down the center aisle with 4 men behind him, each step measured against the marble floor, his black coat brushing his knees, his pale face unreadable beneath the low gold light. I had seen his name in news alerts and heard it whispered by men who pretended not to fear anyone. Harbor City called him a criminal, a king, a ghost in a tailored suit. My father called him a necessary evil whenever business was bad and doors needed opening. I called him the man who had just made every alpha in the room lower their paddle. The auctioneer recovered first, because men like him were paid to smile in disasters. "Mr. Cross," he said, voice thin at the edges, "what an unexpected honor." Damon did not look at him. His eyes stayed on me, blue and cold as winter glass, but not cruel. That was the strange part. Everyone else had looked at me like an object waiting to be owned. Damon looked at me like he was counting how many seconds I could keep standing before the world finally became too heavy. My fingers curled around the ribbon on my wrist. I hated that he noticed. I hated more that my body, traitor that it was, understood the room had changed. The scent blocker at my throat pulsed once, struggling beneath the pressure of so many alphas, but the air around Damon was different. Cedar smoke after rain, clean leather, cold ocean wind against stone. It should have frightened me. It did frighten me. But underneath the fear was something quieter, something my exhausted mind did not know how to name. The last bid was $120,000, the auctioneer said carefully. Damon finally turned his head. 1 million, he said. The room inhaled as one body. My father sat straighter. My stepmother's painted mouth opened, then closed. The auctioneer blinked as if he had misheard. $1 million, sir? Damon removed one black glove finger by finger and tucked it into his coat pocket. Cash transfer. Cleared tonight. On one condition. The auctioneer smiled too quickly. Of course. Anything. Damon stepped closer to the stage, and the lights caught the sharp line of his jaw. The contract is signed in my name only, he said. No secondary claims. No shared access. No family visitation. No private appointments. No exceptions. A murmur broke through the room. My father stood, his face reddening beneath its careful polish. That is not how this arrangement works, Cross. Damon looked at him then, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. No, Mr. Whitaker. That is exactly how it works when desperate men sell what never belonged to them. My breath caught. The auctioneer's smile collapsed. My father's hand tightened around his champagne glass, but he said nothing else. Nobody did. Damon lifted his paddle once, almost lazily, like he was bored by the theater of it all. The auctioneer swallowed and struck the small wooden gavel. Sold, he announced, to Damon Cross. The word sold landed against my chest so hard I nearly stepped backward, but before anyone could touch me, Damon raised one hand. Not him, he said. The handler beside me froze. Damon climbed the 3 steps to the stage himself, stopping several feet away, close enough for me to see the faint silver in his black hair, far enough that I understood he had chosen the distance on purpose. Ethan Whitaker, he said quietly, and my name sounded different in his mouth, less like a label and more like proof I was still real. I know you have no reason to trust me. Smart boy. Do not start now. I stared at him, stunned. Then he took off his coat and held it open, not reaching for me, just offering warmth between us like a question. But if you walk beside me, no one in this room touches you again. Behind him, my father made a sharp sound of outrage. Damon did not turn around. The choice is yours, Ethan. For the first time all night, someone said that word to me. Choice. It shook something loose inside my ribs. My hand trembled as I reached for the coat, not because I trusted Damon Cross, not yet, but because the stage lights were burning my eyes. My family was watching me like a failed investment, and the most feared alpha in the city was the only person in the room who had asked before taking anything. Damon's coat settled over my shoulders with a weight I felt everywhere at once. Warm wool, cedar smoke, cold night air trapped in the seams. It was too large for me, swallowing my hands and hanging past my hips, but no one laughed. No one even breathed too loudly. The same men who had spent the last 10 minutes pricing me like a rare antique now stared at the floor as Damon Cross stepped beside me and offered his arm without touching my back. I looked at his sleeve, then at my father. His face had gone pale in a way I had never seen before. Not sick pale, not tired pale, but frightened pale, like the world had finally remembered his name and come to collect. That should have satisfied me. It did not. Satisfaction required a heart that was not shaking itself apart. I moved because staying still felt worse, taking one step, then another, until I stood beside the most dangerous alpha in Harbor City with my own family staring at me like I had betrayed them by surviving. We were halfway down the stage steps when my stepmother rose from her chair. Ethan, she said sharply, using the voice that had once made me apologize for breathing too loudly at dinner. You will come hear this. Instant. My body reacted before I could stop it. My shoulders flinched. Damon noticed. Of course he noticed. He did not touch me. He simply stopped walking, and somehow the whole room stopped with him. Mrs. Whitaker, he said, calm as a closing door, you will not give him another order tonight. Her diamonds trembled at her throat. He is our son. Damon looked back at me for half a second, and there was no question in his eyes this time. Only a promise he would not make out loud in a room full of witnesses. Then he turned to her again. Strange. I have seen receipts with more warmth than that statement. A few people shifted uncomfortably. My father stepped forward, voice low and furious. You have what you paid for. Leave before you make this ugly. Damon smiled then, just barely, and it was not a pleasant smile. I did not come here to make it ugly, he said. I came here because it already was. He lifted 2 fingers. At first, nothing happened. Then every screen around the ballroom, the glossy black panels I had assumed were decorative, flickered to life. Camera feeds appeared from the hallway, the bidding floor, the private lounge, the signing room behind the stage. Audio transcripts rolled beneath the images. Names, dates, account numbers. My father's signature. The auctioneer made a sound like his soul had tripped over itself. Chairs scraped backward. Someone whispered about lawyers. Someone else whispered about federal charges. Damon's men moved quietly to the exits, not blocking anyone, just standing there with the patient stillness of people who had already planned every inch of the room. My father turned on Damon with a fury so sharp I felt it across 20 feet of carpet. What did you do? Damon adjusted one cuff. I bought time, he said. You sold evidence. The words hit the room harder than the gavel had. For one bright, unreal second, I forgot how to be afraid. The auction was not the trap I thought I had fallen into. It was the trap Damon had set for them. My father looked at me then, and the worst part was not his anger. It was the accusation, as if I had somehow helped ruin him by standing there in a coat I had not asked for, breathing air he no longer controlled. Ethan, he snapped, tell them this is a misunderstanding. My mouth opened. Nothing came out. All my life, he had trained silence into me so well that even freedom felt like a language I had not learned yet. Damon's voice lowered beside me. You do not owe him a performance. 6 words. Quiet. Simple. They steadied me more than they should have. I looked at my father, at the man who had measured my worth in money and manners and obedience, and for the first time, I let him see my hands shake without trying to hide them. It is not a misunderstanding, I said. My voice was small, but in that room, it carried. Damon nodded once to someone near the doors. The ballroom opened like a secret being exposed. People in official Navy jackets entered with badges, tablets, and faces that did not smile. The auctioneer sat down very slowly. My stepmother began to cry in the careful, pretty way she used for charity galas. My father did not cry. He just stared at me as Damon guided me toward the exit, still without touching me, still leaving space for me to choose every step. When the elevator doors closed behind us, the noise vanished. No bidding, no champagne glasses, no family calling my name like a leash. Just my breathing, too fast, and Damon Cross standing 3 feet away with his hands folded in front of him. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "You are safe for the next few minutes." I hated that those words almost broke me. Only the next few minutes? I asked. Damon's reflection met mine in the polished elevator doors. His face was calm, but his eyes were not. For tonight, he said, that is where we start. The elevator carried us upward first, not down, which confused me until the doors opened into a private service corridor lined with cream walls and security cameras tucked into the corners like quiet metal eyes. Damon stepped out first, paused, then moved aside so I could choose whether to follow. It was such a small thing, that space he kept leaving between us, but after a lifetime of people grabbing my wrist, steering my shoulders, deciding where my body belonged, small things felt enormous. My legs nearly forgot their job halfway down the hallway. Damon noticed without making a scene. He stopped beside a window overlooking downtown Harbor City, where headlights moved like streams of gold between glass towers and the cold, dark shimmer of the bay. We can wait here, he said. I stared at his reflection in the window. You just exposed half the richest alphas in the city, and you want to wait in a hallway because I look dizzy? His mouth moved like he almost smiled, then thought better of it. Yes, that was the moment I realized Damon Cross was going to be a problem for my entire understanding of fear. A black SUV waited behind the hotel with tinted windows and a driver who opened the door without looking at me too long. I expected Damon to sit beside me, to crowd me with all that power and cedar smoke, but he took the opposite seat, angled toward the window, hands visible on his knees. No locked doors, he said as the car pulled into traffic. No debt, no private claim. You are under my legal protection because the contract says you must be until the emergency hearing, but you are not mine. The word legal should have comforted me. It did not. My father had lawyers too. He had papers for everything, even cruelty. I pulled Damon's coat tighter around myself and watched the city slide by in silver streaks. Where are you taking me? Black Harbor, he said. My house. Of course. Because nothing said healing like being taken to a Mafia Alpha's mansion at 1:30 in the morning. My laugh came out thin and wrong. Sorry. I think my nervous system just tried to leave my body through sarcasm. This time, Damon actually did smile, faint as a match in fog. Keep it. It means you are still here. The drive took 20 minutes, maybe 30. Time felt rubbery after midnight. Black Harbor sat on a cliff above the water, a stone house too large to be called a house and too quiet to be called a mansion. The ocean spread behind it, black and restless, with moonlight breaking in pale lines across the waves. Inside, there were no chandeliers, no gold statues, no dramatic velvet throne like the tabloids probably imagined. Just warm lamps, dark wood floors, clean white walls, and the faint smell of coffee somewhere far away. A woman in her 50s with silver hair and kind brown eyes waited near the entryway. "This is Margaret Hale," Damon said. "She manages the house. She is a retired nurse, and she will help if you want help." Margaret did not rush me. She did not coo. She simply held out a folded stack of soft clothes and said, "There is soup if your stomach can handle it, tea if it cannot, and a room with a lock only you can open." My throat tightened so fast I had to look down. Damon's shoes stopped several feet away. "Your room is upstairs," he said. "Mine is in the east wing. Different hallway. Margaret has the only spare key for emergencies, and even she will knock." I should have thanked him. A normal person would have thanked him. Instead, I asked, "How many others have you brought here?" The question landed sharper than I meant it to. Margaret's face softened. Damon went very still. For a second, I thought I had offended him. Then he looked toward the staircase, where the shadows were warm instead of frightening. "7," he said. "All Omegas. All from rooms like that one. All free now." The house seemed to change around me. Not safer exactly, but deeper, as if every quiet lamp had been left on for someone who once arrived shaking. My fingers tightened around the clothes. "You bought them too?" Damon looked back at me. "I bought the paperwork that kept them trapped. Then I burned the paperwork in court." Outside, waves struck the cliff below, steady and dark. For the first time since the curtain opened, I breathed all the way in. Margaret led me upstairs while Damon stayed in the foyer, as if even following me to a bedroom door might be one step too close. The room she showed me overlooked the ocean, and for a second I just stood there with Damon's coat still around my shoulders, staring like I had forgotten how rooms worked. There was a queen bed with a blue quilt, a reading chair by the window, a bathroom stocked with unopened toothbrushes and mild soap, and a small brass key sitting on the nightstand beside a note that said, "This door locks from the inside." I picked up the key with 2 fingers. It was ordinary, barely heavier than a quarter, and somehow it made my eyes sting. My family had given me rooms my whole life. Beautiful rooms. Expensive rooms. Rooms with curtains imported from Italy and rugs no one was allowed to step on with shoes. But they had never given me a door that belonged to me. Margaret placed the folded clothes at the foot of the bed and pretended not to notice the way I was breathing through my mouth. "Trauma makes the body suspicious of kindness," she said gently. "You do not have to decide whether this place is safe tonight. You only have to sleep behind a locked door and wake up still in charge of opening it." I laughed once, small and cracked. "You say that like it is easy." "No," she said. "I say it because it is hard." After she left, I changed into a soft gray sweatshirt and sweatpants that smelled like laundry detergent instead of perfume and panic. Damon's coat hung over the chair like a dark question. I told myself not to touch it again. Naturally, I touched the sleeve within 5 minutes, because apparently my survival instincts and my curiosity had never been properly introduced. The fabric was warm from my body now, not his, but the cedar smoke scent remained faint at the collar. I stepped back like the coat had caught me doing something embarrassing. Then I remembered no one was watching. That was worse, somehow. Freedom had too much silence in it. I sat on the bed, key in my palm, and waited for my heart to stop acting like it was still under the hotel lights. It did not. At 3 in the morning, I opened the door because sleep was clearly a myth invented by people without family trauma. The hallway was dim, lit by low amber sconces along the baseboards. I expected guards. I expected cameras. I expected some sign that kindness was just a prettier cage. Instead, I found Margaret's promised tea tray on a small table outside my door, along with toast, soup in a thermos, and a handwritten note that said, "No pressure. Just options." I should have gone back inside. I followed the smell of coffee instead. Downstairs, the house was quiet except for the ocean and the low murmur of voices from behind a half-open office door. Damon's voice came first, controlled and tired. "The emergency petition must be filed before 8. No delay." Then another man answered, older, precise. The Whitakers are already claiming emotional distress and contractual misunderstanding. Damon gave a humorless breath. They can misunderstand a courtroom. Ethan is not going back. My name froze me in the hallway. The older man continued. The bloodline clause is ugly, but temporary protection only holds for 72 hours unless he consents to extended sanctuary or the court grants independent status. A pause followed. Then Damon said, he will not be pressured. Not by them. Not by me. My fingers tightened around the stair rail. 72 hours. 3 days. That was all the law could give me before my family tried to turn paperwork into a leash again. I stepped back, but the floorboard betrayed me with a soft creak. The office went silent. Damon appeared in the doorway a moment later, white shirt sleeves rolled to his forearms, black tie loosened, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. He looked less like a city nightmare and more like a man who had not slept since long before he walked into that ballroom. I lifted my chin before fear could lower it for me. Were you going to tell me? Yes, he said. In the morning, after food, sleep, and a lawyer who speaks gently. That answer was so practical it almost made me angry. Almost. What happens after 72 hours? Damon held my gaze, steady and careful. We fight them in daylight, with your consent, your testimony if you choose, and every document they were arrogant enough to sign. And if I panic, then we pause. And if I cannot speak, then you write. And if I cannot do that either? His expression softened by a fraction, so small I might have missed it if the whole world had not narrowed to his face. Then you breathe, Ethan. We can start there again. By morning, Black Harbor looked less like a fortress and more like a place the sun had reluctantly agreed to forgive. Pale lights spilled through the tall windows, turning the ocean silver and making the kitchen smell warmer than anything had the right to smell after a night like mine. Margaret made scrambled eggs, buttered toast, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead, or at least one emotionally. Ruined Omega with a legal crisis before breakfast. I sat at the island in borrowed clothes, both hands wrapped around a mug I had not taken a sip from, while Damon stood near the far counter with a tablet in one hand and a phone pressed to his ear. He had changed into a charcoal suit, but his tie was missing, and there was a faint crease between his brows that made him look less untouchable and more human in the most inconvenient way possible. I hated noticing that. Not hated exactly. Distrusted. Noticing felt like the first step toward caring, and caring felt like leaving the door open in a storm. A woman named Priya Lawson arrived at 8:15 sharp, carrying a leather briefcase, wearing navy heels, and projecting the calm menace of someone who could destroy a man with a comma. She was Damon's attorney, but she spoke to me first. Not over me. Not around me. To me. Ethan, I am here to explain your options. Damon is paying my firm, but my duty in this matter is to your stated choice. If you tell me to leave, I leave. If you tell me to file, I file. If you tell me to sit quietly while you eat toast and stare at the ocean, I bill him for the hour and enjoy the view. I blinked at her. Damon, from the counter, said, she is expensive. Priya smiled without looking at him. He can afford character development. Something in my chest loosened before I could stop it. We spent the next hour at the dining table with papers spread between us like a map of every ugly thing my family had tried to make legal. Priya explained the bloodline clause, sanctuary protection, emergency independence status, and the hearing scheduled for the next afternoon at the Harbor City Civic Court. Every sentence sounded impossible until she broke it into smaller pieces. My family could argue I had been confused. They could claim Damon had manipulated me. They could pressure the court to place me under family supervision until a full investigation. My stomach turned at those words. Family supervision sounded polite. So did a velvet curtain. So did a silver ribbon. Damon did not interrupt once. He stood by the window, arms folded, letting Priya lead, letting me answer, letting silence exist, without filling it with commands. When Priya asked whether I wanted extended sanctuary at Black Harbor, my pen hovered over the page so long the ink made a tiny dark dot. It was not a claim. It was not a bond. It was not ownership. It was a temporary legal shield I could end at any time. Still, signing anything made my pulse climb into my throat. Damon noticed. Of course he did. He stepped toward the door instead of toward me. I will be outside. I looked up. You do not have to leave. His gaze met mine, quiet and unreadable. I know. That is why I am. He left before I could decide whether to thank him or be angry that he understood too much. Priya waited until the door clicked shut. He does that with all of them, she said. All of who? The people he pulls out of places like that hotel. I stared at the paper. Margaret said 7. Priya's expression softened. 8 now? She opened a folder and turned it toward me. There were photographs inside, not surveillance shots, not records of shame, but ordinary pictures. A young man laughing beside a food truck in Chicago. Another holding a college acceptance letter in Oregon. 2 standing together outside a small bakery in Vermont. New names. New lives. New doors. Damon never told me because he thought it would make me trust him too fast. My fingers touched the edge of the folder. Outside the window, Damon stood alone on the terrace, phone lowered, face turned toward the gray water like he was listening to something only the ocean could say. For the first time, the question inside me changed. Not why did he buy me? Not what does he want? But how many times had this man made himself look like a monster so someone else could escape one? I signed the sanctuary form at 11:32 in the morning with my hand shaking hard enough to turn my name into a nervous little storm across the page. Priya did not comment on the messy signature. Margaret slid a plate of toast closer to my elbow like carbohydrates could hold civilization together. Damon stayed outside on the terrace until I opened the glass door myself. The wind coming off the ocean caught my pale hair and pushed it across my eyes, and for one humiliating second, I just stood there blinking through it like a confused ghost in borrowed sweatpants. Damon looked over, saw me battling my own bangs, and reached into his pocket. Then he stopped. He held out a clean black hair tie on his open palm instead of stepping closer. I stared at it. You just carry those around? I asked. His expression remained perfectly serious. Margaret says long hair is a tactical disadvantage in coastal weather. I took the hair tie before I could laugh, because laughing felt dangerous in a different way than crying. I tied my hair back badly. Damon did not point that out, which I appreciated, because I had been auctioned less than 12 hours ago and did not have the emotional range for hair criticism. For a while, we stood side by side with 3 feet of air between us, and the whole Atlantic looking like crushed steel below the cliff. Priya showed me the photographs, I said. Damon's jaw tightened. She should not have done that without asking. She thought I needed to know. Did you? I looked at the water. Yes. The answer came easier than I expected. Behind us, somewhere inside the house, a phone started ringing. Neither of us moved. I thought about the faces in those photographs, the lives Damon had helped build and never used as proof that he was good. My family had donated to museums and put their names on plaques, then reminded everyone at dinner. Damon Cross apparently changed people's lives and let them disappear without applause. That was either noble or emotionally concerning. Probably both. Why do you do it? I asked. He was quiet long enough that I thought he would not answer. Then he said, my mother was an Omega from a family like yours. Important name. Beautiful house. Doors that locked from the wrong side. The wind moved between us, cold and sharp. My throat tightened. What happened to her? Damon's hand rested on the stone railing, his fingers still. She got out too late to believe freedom belonged to her. That was all he said, and it was enough. Too much, maybe. The sentence did not describe anything graphic, but it carried the shape of an old grief so clearly that I had to look away. I am sorry, I said. Damon gave the smallest nod. I built my reputation because fear opens doors kindness cannot reach. Then I used the door. Something about that should have sounded ruthless. Instead, it sounded lonely. Before I could answer, Margaret appeared at the terrace entrance with my phone in her hand. Her face had changed. The soft edges were gone. This was the nurse version of her, the woman who could see a fever before the patient admitted they were cold. Ethan, your father has called 12 times. There are messages. Damon turned toward her, instantly alert, but still not stepping into my space. You do not have to listen, he said. I knew that. I also knew my father had trained a hook into my ribs, and pretending it was not there would not remove it. I took the phone. The first voicemail began with my full name, clipped and furious. By the 10th second, he was calling me confused. By the 20th, ungrateful. By the 30th, he was crying in that dry, practiced way he used for boardrooms and funerals. He said my mother would be ashamed of me. The terrace blurred. Not dramatically. Not like movies. Just enough that Damon's black coat and the gray ocean became smears of dark and light. My scent blocker pulsed at my throat, then went cold. Margaret stepped closer, but Damon lifted one hand, stopping everyone except me from deciding what I needed. Ethan, he said, voice low. Put the phone down. I could not. My father's voice kept pouring out, familiar as a locked room. Damon did not take the phone from me. He only crouched a few feet away so I did not have to look up to meet his eyes. You are not a bad son for escaping a cage, he said. My fingers opened. The phone landed on the stone between us, still talking. For once, I let it finish without obeying. The phone went quiet on its own, and the silence afterward felt bigger than the ocean. I kept staring at it on the stone terrace, half expecting my father's voice to crawl back out and tell me I was standing wrong, breathing wrong, ruining everything by existing outside his reach. Damon stayed crouched a few feet away, one knee bent, hands visible, not touching the phone, not touching me, not turning my panic into a performance. Margaret knelt on my other side with a glass of water and the expression of someone holding a blanket around a fire alarm. No one told me to calm down. That helped more than calming down would have. My scent blocker gave another weak pulse at my throat, then steadied. I pressed 2 fingers against it, embarrassed by how fast my body had reacted to a recording. Damon noticed, because apparently noticing was his most irritating hobby. He did not mention it. Instead, he said, your father knows which words were installed first. That is why they still open doors. I swallowed hard. I hate that they do. So did I, he said. That answer pulled my eyes to his. Did? Damon looked past me to the water, where a gull cut through the morning fog like a scrap of white paper. One day I realized the voice in my head was not mine. After that, I stopped obeying it just because it sounded familiar. I wanted to ask how long that took. I also did not want to know, because the answer would probably be measured in years, and I was currently trying to survive the next hour. Before I could say anything, the gate intercom chimed from inside the house, soft but sharp enough to make all 3 of us turn. Margaret stood first. Damon rose slowly, every trace of softness folding away until the feared man from the ballroom stood in front of me again. Not aimed at me, never at me, but aimed at whatever had found the gate. Priya's heels clicked across the floor a moment later, fast and controlled. We have a problem, she said. A court courier is at the entrance with an emergency notice from the Whitaker legal team. They are requesting temporary family supervision based on medical instability. My stomach dropped so cleanly it felt like missing a stair in the dark. Medical instability? I repeated. Priya's mouth tightened. They attached old psychiatric evaluations from when you were 17. Damon's voice went cold. Those records were sealed. Apparently your father had copies. The terrace tilted. Not physically. The stone stayed still. The ocean stayed where oceans belonged. But inside me, something old and ugly opened its eyes. When I was 17, I stopped speaking for 3 weeks after my mother died. My father called it a breakdown. My therapist called it grief. My stepmother called it embarrassing. Now they were trying to turn it into a leash with letterhead. My hands started shaking again. But this time the feeling beneath it was not fear alone. It was anger, small and bright, like a match protected inside cupped palms. Damon looked at Priya. Can they move the hearing? They are trying to, she said. If the judge accepts the emergency review, Ethan may be ordered to appear with a family representative present. No, I said. Everyone looked at me. The word had come out louder than I expected, rough around the edges, but standing on its own 2 feet. I cleared my throat. No, they do not get to bring my worst year into court and call it proof that I belong to them. Priya stepped closer, careful and alert. Ethan, we can challenge it. We can request a closed review. We can submit a written statement. I looked at the phone still lying on the terrace, then at Damon's coat folded over the chair inside, then at the house that had locks on the right side of the doors. My whole life, people had spoken for me and called it protection. My father had sold my silence as obedience. My stepmother had framed my grief like a stain. Even Damon, with all his restraint, could not rescue the part of me that had to stand up on its own. I want to testify, I said. Damon's face changed, not with surprise exactly, but with something deeper, quieter. Pride, maybe. Fear, maybe. Both looked strange on him. Priya nodded once. Then we prepare. Margaret handed me the glass of water. My fingers were still shaking when I took it, but the water did not spill. Across the terrace, Damon bent down, picked up my phone, and placed it gently on the table instead of handing it back like a weapon. You do not have to become fearless by tomorrow, he said. I looked toward the gate, where my family's newest trap waited in a sealed envelope. Good, I said, because I am definitely not. For the first time since the hotel, my voice did not sound small to me. But I am done being useful to people who only love me when I disappear. The Harbor City Civic Court looked nothing like justice. In my imagination, there were no shining marble steps, no dramatic flags snapping in the wind, no thunder rolling over the skyline. It was just a beige government building 7 miles from Black Harbor with metal detectors, tired fluorescent lights, and vending machines that probably had more emotional stability than I did. Priya walked on my left with a folder tucked beneath her arm. Damon walked on my right, close enough that the cedar smoke calm of him reached me, far enough that no one could mistake his presence for control. Cameras waited outside the entrance, hungry little red lights blinking in the gray afternoon. My father stood near the courthouse doors in a Navy suit, looking tragic, expensive, and deeply offended that consequences had scheduled an appointment. My stepmother dabbed her eyes with a tissue she had not needed until reporters arrived. For one sharp second, my body forgot it was free. Then Damon lowered his voice. "Eyes on the door, Ethan." "Not them." So I looked at the door. One step, then another. The hearing room was smaller than I expected, with pale wood benches and a judge whose glasses sat low on her nose as she read the emergency petition. The Whitaker attorney spoke first, all smooth concern and polished cruelty, explaining that I was fragile, confused, emotionally overwhelmed, and possibly under Damon's influence. He said my family only wanted to bring me home for care. Home. The word almost made me laugh. Almost. Priya stood next and dismantled him with the calm precision of a woman opening a locked box. She presented the auction records, the hidden contracts, the sealed evaluations my father had misused, and the sanctuary form I had signed without a single alpha claim attached to it. Then the judge looked at me. "Mr. Whitaker," she said, "do you wish to speak?" My father's head turned. That old hook pulled once beneath my ribs. I stood anyway. The microphone waited in front of me like a tiny black cliff. My hands shook when I adjusted it, but my voice came out clear enough. "My name is Ethan Whitaker. I am 22 years old. I am not confused. I was not rescued because I am weak. I was rescued because people with power decided my silence was useful, and someone finally interrupted them." My father looked down. My stepmother stopped pretending to cry. I kept going. When I was 17, I lost my mother and stopped speaking because grief took up every inch of my throat. That was not instability. That was loss. Last night, my family used old pain to argue that I should not own my future. Today, I am saying in front of this court that I do. The room was completely still. I did not look at Damon until the judge asked whether he had claimed any personal right over me. Damon stood, buttoned his jacket, and said, "No, Your Honor. Ethan belongs to himself." It should have been a simple sentence. It felt like the floor returning beneath my feet. The judge granted emergency independence status, extended sanctuary by my consent only, and ordered a full investigation into the auction network. My father tried to speak, but the judge raised one hand, and for once in his life, someone more powerful told him to be quiet. Outside, rain had started, soft and silver against the courthouse steps. Reporters shouted questions. Priya handled them like traffic cones. Margaret waited by the SUV with an umbrella and a thermos of soup, because apparently no legal victory was complete without carbohydrates. Damon stopped beside me before opening the car door. "Black Harbor is available as long as you choose it," he said. "I can arrange another safe house by morning if you prefer." The rain dotted his black coat. His hair was damp at the temples. He looked tired, careful, and not nearly as frightening as he wanted the world to believe. I thought about my old room, my father's voice, the stage lights, the coat on my shoulders, the terrace, the ocean, the key that locked from the inside. Then I took the umbrella from Margaret, stepped closer to Damon by choice, and held it over both of us. "I want to go back," I said. "Not as property, not as evidence, not as someone you saved." His eyes softened, barely, but enough. "Then how?" he asked. I looked past him toward the road leading east, toward the cliff house waiting above the water, toward a life that still scared me, but no longer belonged to fear. "As myself," I said. "And for the first time," Damon Cross smiled like he believed me.